Hello, world. You're listening to Eleanor Wagner's Strange and Scary World here on the Paranormal UK Radio Network, where we're always creeping it real. I'm your host, Eleanor Wagner.
This feisty South Plainfield, New Jersey girl has one heck of a resume.
Not only has she guest starred on a number of popular television shows, but she co-hosted a call-in psychic show for 8 years. Her own TV series, Dead Tenants, gives all the others a run for their money. If you're looking for answers in your personal life, just curious, or interested in her knowledge of the spirit world, she's the go-to because she's one of the nation's leading authorities on psychic encounters with 20 years experience bridging the gap between the living and the dead for tens of thousands of people. Hans Holzer himself named her one of the top 20 psychics. She even conducted the 82nd official Houdini seance for the inner circle of magicians and Houdini enthusiasts, and has been covered by the New York Times, CNN, Fox News Network, MSNBC, Reuters News Media, and The Today Show. Please join me in welcoming today's guest, Jane Doherty.
Thank you. Glad to be with you.
I'm thoroughly impressed and so happy to finally meet you after hearing about you for so many years. I see you've been around the block more than once.
Yes.
Well, why don't we begin with how you got started? Have you always been sensitive to this sort of thing, and does it run in your family?
Actually, I was not sensitive to it. My mother did have ability. There's no question about that, because she would see spirits and make predictions, but she simply said it was just the way her mind worked. So I just accepted it as that. There were a few occasions where things came to me, but I think I was more in high school a very positive thinker. I believed in the power of the mind. And then it wasn't until, I'd say in my very, very early 30s, maybe I was just 30, that I became interested in the paranormal by going to the Jersey Society of Parapsychology. They had a conference, so I went to explore. And that's where I found out a lot of things about my own psychic ability. But I still was a skeptic. I really didn't believe in it. I just thought, okay, this is fun. Let me just experience it. After going to over 150 psychics in my own personal research, all of them telling me the same thing, that I would be a well-known psychic. So I felt the only way to prove or disprove whether this was real or not was attempt to develop it. Although I never intended to do anything with it except prove to myself whether it was real and maybe teach about it. And that's how it all began.
Oh, my.
Yes, very
well,
different.
That's incredible. You were actually, yes, I was going to say you're the very first person that I've ever spoken to. And I haven't spoken to that many, but from everyone that I have, no one has said that they didn't have the sensitivity. So that's pretty amazing.
No, I didn't have it. I mean, I may have been a sensitive person just as far as personality, but there wasn't anything. I wasn't interested in it and didn't know, except that I knew my mother had these moments. And there was one other time I had a moment. I was a dancer, so I was practicing my dancing in front of a mirror. And while I was doing that, I did hear in my head that I would write books after the age of 40. I'd be an author.
And that's something.
But I just said, okay, I guess it's the way the mind works. That's all I thought of it as.
Wow. Well, your television career over the years is amazing as well. I see you've made appearances on quite a number of shows because of your psychic background. Can you tell me a little bit about On Dead Famous? What is the show about and why were you on it?
Dead Famous really had to do with investigating places that were celebrities, that were deceased celebrities. And so I was invited to try to make contact in a seance with Grace Kelly. And that was in Pennsylvania at a house that she lived in.
How did that go?
So that was interesting. There was some information that came out, but it was a very interesting experience to be there and to try to get Grace Kelly.
Were you able to reach her or no?
Yes. There was some indication that I did reach her.
Very good. If someone were to look for it, let's say on Netflix or somewhere, would they be able to watch the show, you think?
Gee, I don't know, because that wasn't my show. That I was an invited guest. It probably is still around, I would think.
So it's On Dead Famous. So that's what we'd have to look for. Yes. And then we just have to look for your name as the co-host or guest in a certain episode. Now, the Sightings show, what was that show about?
That was one of the original ghost shows. And what had happened is I was doing ghost tours. In fact, I was the first person in the state of New Jersey to conduct ghost tours and public seances seances. So I was doing this at the Spy House Museum in Port Monmouth, New Jersey. And what had happened, the Asbury Park Press, a lot of the Star Ledger, a lot of papers covered it. But what happened is I was knocked into a trance when I was there, and a spirit spoke through me, a pirate that exists there, and spoke about the buried treasure and things like this. So a archaeological dig was planned. They did have equipment there, and that's what the sightings was videotaping and making a TV show of, is that particular episode of me being there and the archaeological dig. But they couldn't go any further with it. Even though the equipment showed something, that there were tunnels, that was something, they couldn't dig because it would collapse everything, is what they determined. So they couldn't go further with it. But many times that I was there and I spoke to people in the area and police I spoke to, and they had said that many times people found pure silver tea sets, things like this in the waters there. So, and there was pirates a long time ago. And that house had a lot of spirits in it. And it also had secret places where you could hide, because it was a place that spies would hang out at times. So that's what that show was about. It was about the spy house and what I had uncovered there and the spirits that were there.
And if they found silver sets like that, I'm sure that there was a buried treasure that was never unearthed because of the fear of collapse.
Yes. Yeah, they couldn't go after to look to see if there was buried gold, because the earth would collapse. They checked it all out, so they had to scrap the idea.
Oh boy, bummer for them.
Yes.
How about the Jenny Jones show? I loved her. Used to watch her all the time. What was that particular show about, and why were you on it?
Well, she wanted to do an episode on ghosts, and she heard about me. I don't know how she heard about me. I forgot. So she contacted me to see if I knew of any place that was currently haunted that they could send me to. So it just so happened that somebody had just emailed me requesting help for her mother, who lived right on the border of North and South Carolina. So I presented that to the Jenny Jones show, and they knew a place here in New Jersey that they wanted to send me to. So they went to it's a tavern in Point Pleasant. We started there, and then we flew to right at the border of North Carolina and South Carolina. It was like right there. Half of the house was in South Carolina, half of the house was in North Carolina. And the activity that was going on, the woman the bed would shake, and she was being levitated at times. And her boyfriend would walk around, and there would be a spirit behind him and whispering, and he could feel, and he felt threatened. He could feel on his back that whispering going on and his breath. So that's why I was sent there, to determine who it was, why, and whatever else I could find out. Now, what I did learn, and it's funny, we did this investigation at 3 a.m. because if there was snow, and they had to de-ice the plane at Newark Airport. Then we had to stop at another airport, and they had to de-ice it again. So everything got delayed. Mm-hmm. So we never reached there until almost 3 a.m.
Oh,
and we went ahead with it. I did the investigation at 3.
Troopers.
So what was interesting is, as I climbed into bed, because I'll go and I'll try to recreate what they're saying. Let me see what I feel in the situation. So I did go to the area where they had found, and I was being levitated. I could feel that going on. The reporter's hair was standing on end. And visions I received wasn't a Native American, which shocked me, because they said it wasn't on Indian burial ground, but I got this clear impression, and they're very strong spirits, very strong. So I can see, and he obviously didn't like her boyfriend and was possessive of the woman that lived there. And across the street was an Indian burial ground. And what was curious is that the house was made of all these spit stones that were found in the area. So combined with that, those stones attached to the house would certainly be creating an energy field for them to manifest, and making it even stronger because of being a Native American. So it was quite an interesting investigation.
Would you say that those stones that they used were taken from the burial ground itself?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
Oh my, yes. A recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
Were you able to explain to the Indian spirit who the woman was, or were you able to settle it or send him onto the line?
I was able to quiet it down, because he was going to leave her. He wasn't going to stay there. And I did have a communication with a Native American. And I guess he must have felt threatened. He was all this while just with her in the house. So he felt threatened once the man moved in. And that's what I had to communicate. That didn't mean that she wasn't going to pay attention to him or that he wasn't any less important to her because her boyfriend was there. And then you just try to get it quiet, things like this, just to help to quiet. And then I also have to instruct them, because if both of them were getting frightened by the spirit, that energy of fear is what the spirit can feed off of and create a stronger energy in the spirit to be able to do things. So I had to explain that to them on how their own emotions were creating more activity and strength in the spirit.
And she was receptive to that kind of communication with the spirit so that she could just continue living in peace.
Yes.
Now, the ghost stories on the Biography channel, obviously that sounds pretty self-explanatory. It's about ghost stories, correct?
Yes. Well, that was an interesting one, because what had happened is there was a go-go bar here in South Plainfield, and I was called in to do an investigation there. So it's a funny story. So I went to do the investigation, and to me, I'd never been in a go-go bar. So the go-go dancers were dancing while I'm trying to conduct this investigation.
Ay.
Yeah, it was wild. It was absolutely wild. And there was a lot of information that I was able to receive, including a go-go dancer who had died on her way to work, which we found out there was. I think her name was Ariel, and she did die on her way to work. And there also was an image that they were receiving and capturing on the cameras during the night, the security cameras, that made no sense. And so therefore, I had to explore that a little bit further. And what I felt it was a gangster. Later on, we were able to determine, as you put things together, the owner of the bar actually had a so-called cousin that his mother raised. Wasn't blood, but he had no place to go, so the mother raised him. And he happened to be that Mad Dog Cole gangster in New York that was killed in a phone booth. So that triggered him following the owner from New York to this bar. And so he was. So this story was then picked up, and they flew us out to California to interview us for what had happened. Now, the funny thing is, that was the day I got divorced. It wasn't supposed to go on the newspaper yet until Halloween. And I'm in court waiting to be called into court. And I see these lawyers all talking in the hallway about a newspaper article about a ghost in a go-go bar. Oh my God, it hit the newspaper today. My lawyer, my ex's lawyer, even the judge was aware of this story. So, but I didn't wear any makeup that day, so not expecting anything like this to happen. So then I got a call from my daughter that there's NBC News, there's CNN News, I don't know how many news stations were at the bar waiting for me. So she brought me makeup to put on real quickly. So it was very funny. And what that triggered was my being called to Comedy Central, and with Steve Farrell. And what I had to play was a medium trying to make contact with Madonna about her children's storybooks. It was a riot. I mean, I never played something like that,
right.
But it was an hilarious thing.
One thing leads to another.
Oh, yeah. You never know what it can bring.
Well, at some point in time, you co-hosted a call-in psychic show for 8 years, in fact. Was this the kind of thing where people were able to phone in to get personal psychic readings? And what part did you play in the production of the series?
Yes, I didn't produce it. I was just a co-host with the regular host on, and we would be on every week from either a Friday or a Tuesday. I started with a Tuesday, and then it went to a Friday. And yes, it would be a psychic call-in show where people would call in with their questions, and I would answer it psychically. Probably the most dramatic was during the break. The host asked me a personal question of his own, which had to do with the USS Cole had just been bombed. And he asked me if it was going to be attacked anymore. And I blurted out, no, but the terrorists are on our soil and they're going to attack New York City, Washington, D.C., and other places. And he gasped. I gasped because it just came out of me.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was shocked by it. And then I got known on that show also for finding lost objects. I don't know how many engagement rings I found. It was funny.
And when you said the attack on the U.S., were you referring to the Twin Towers?
Yes.
Yes. Incredible. I love psychics. I've gone to many of them over the years. For me, it's like therapy. And as for those who can see and or hear spirit, I've always wanted to know if a beloved deceased loved one had a message for me. A friend of mine who is a medium, she's part of my team, out of the blue said, give me a call on your way to work. And she had something to share with me, which was incredible because it was something I guess I'd been waiting for a really long time. So I don't know if you see anybody around me or not, if you feel anything, but if you do, please spew it out.
I have to go into a psychic mode.
Okay.
But yes, if I see anything, I will tell you.
Dang. There came a time when you were offered your own series, two, in fact. So let's start with Dead Tenants. What's that about?
Yes, Dead Tenants was all about investigations where we went to various houses, not in buildings like today where it's a historic place, but actually homes where people were having a problem with ghosts. And so we would go in not knowing anything, and I would do the investigation, and then it would be compared to what they had reported. And that's what the show was about. And I would do a seance at the end of each episode.
Oh, my.
It was a very interesting TV show. Unfortunately, it didn't go very far. It meant more in Europe.
That's okay.
Yeah.
You can't complain about that.
Producer and the executive producer at the time of TLC fought, and that was it. It was a big thing. So it wasn't played all the episodes until it got picked up by Discovery in the English channel in Europe. And I mean, I've gotten a lot of emails from India and people asking me to find missing people and different things like that. But it went to every country out there, including Dubai. So I even had people there contacting me. It was funny.
This podcast is broadcast on Paranormal UK, so you might be finding more people reaching out to you after they listen to you on this episode. Us New Jersey girls interviewing and broadcasting out into the UK. Now, Jane Doherty Investigates. What is that about?
That was going to be a series. We only did one because the producer realized it cost money and he was just a young producer. So that was at Shades of Death Row.
Yeah, okay.
The place now in
Shades
New
of
Jersey.
Death Row. Yeah. Yes.
And so we went there with 4 people who were skeptics, and we were going to do a seance inside the cabin, and then from there we were going into the woods to an area to investigate and probably to do a seance.
Was that the cave, the fairy cave at Shades of Death Row?
No, it was at a lake.
Okay, Ghost Lake.
Ghost Lake, that's what it was. Yes.
Okay. Usually everybody puts those three together, Shades of Death, and the lake is right off of Shades of Death, and then the cave is on the lake. I went on an investigation there too, and this is a funny story to share with you. We had our investigation going on, and we did our thing. It was at night, and we'd been there for a couple hours, and we're on our way out because we're done, and we're heading towards the car, and all of a sudden this van pulls up beside us, and there are these 2 adults in the car, and they're going, "Are you going up to the cave?" And we said, "No, we're actually done. We just finished." And they were like, "Oh, okay, good. Because my husband's got a bear suit and he's going to put the bear suit on and he's got this growling on the radio and he's going to go hide in the cave and we're going to scare the shit out of our nephew and his friends."
Oh my God.
So we were like, oh, damn, we wish we were there to watch this unfold because they wanted to just scare the bejesus out of the kids. So he did. He had this bear suit. He lifted it up and he showed it to us and he let us listen to the growl on the radio. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I would have loved to have found out how that worked out.
Oh, that's funny. I wasn't aware that there was a cave there. I guess the producer didn't know that, or he had me in there too. But it was scary. It was very scary.
Were you able to get up to the cave? Because it's quite a trek, actually. I mean,
no, we didn't go to. we didn't go to the cave. I don't think he knew about the cave.
Oh, okay.
Otherwise, he probably would have had me go to the cave, but he just focused around the lake.
I see.
And we were going to do a little seance around the lake. And what happened is I started to feel something that didn't feel right, because we were going to walk across and go up. Maybe that's where we're headed. We had to go up a hill and go into another area. But I felt something. And so we stopped the seance and we just walked over to the lake area closer. And then what happened is I got this awful feeling, and we looked up into the sky, and there was this bright light, and the light was shining. It was at a distance, but the light was shining right there where we were at the lake. It was weird. Now, what we didn't know until the producer edited it, at that moment that I felt that someone was there, there is an image of the shirt, like a hand going up the shirt. And he was a police officer, and him hitting, like something was there. And it turned out to be something went up his shirt.
When you had this feeling, you didn't know what it was that you were feeling? You didn't
know what it was. I knew we were in danger.
Really?
Yes. And I said, we need to leave. And then we stopped at one other little spot just before leaving. And I got that feeling again. My guides, it went nuts. And I said, got to get out of here now. I said, there's danger. And we got out. And what happened is, we had two cars, and the car I was in made it right to the cabin. The car the producer was in, well over an hour, he wasn't there. We were about to go looking for him. And what happened is, as soon as we pulled out, he pulled out behind us, and then a car pulled out behind him, and it had like Men in Black.
Ooh.
Yeah, it was following him, and they were riding all over trying to lose this vehicle. So it took over an hour. They finally did, by making a different kind of turn, and they came back to the log cabin. Well, I didn't stay the night. A few of them didn't stay the night after that, because I still felt danger.
Now, when you say Men in Black, are you insinuating the possibility of UFO over the water?
Yes.
Okay. Because in my interviews, I've found a lot of UFOs over water, or near water, or in water.
Yes, definitely. That's what I was feeling, because that's what it even looked like up in the sky, this light. And because it was weird, a light would be shining down, you would see it shining in the middle of the lake.
Correct.
At a distance. Instead, there was no light shining there, but it was shining about 6 feet from us in the lake. So it was really a strange kind of light.
Crazy cool. Oh my. Now, so you said this show never, unfortunately, got off the ground.
It went into a DVD, is what it did. DVD.
I'm going to have to look for that. How long was Dead Tenants on for?
It played a couple of years in repeats in Europe and all these different places. In fact, it wasn't too long ago, I'd say about 3 years ago, 2 to 3 years ago, somebody emailed me and said, in Greece, I'm looking at you now, watching me on TV. So it repeated in a lot of the countries also.
It must be fun for you to get those emails from people from all over the place.
Yes, it is. It's a lot of fun, because you're meeting, people through that, and it is fun. It's just a lot of fun.
I know that when I'm writing, the majority of the stories I get are from counties around here, but I have an other strange phenomena category in my book, which enables me to write whatever I want. So in the first book, I wrote about Bigfoot and UFO accounts from people. And then in the second book, I was writing about people's moments with their loved ones at their time of death. And that enabled me to speak to people all over the country and all over the world. So I've connected with people in the UK, but I've also spoke to people in British Columbia, in Alabama, which has been wonderful, because there are so many stories for people to share. And I don't have to just limit them to the counties when I talk about those things. And like you, when they reach out, it's just very exciting. When they're excited, I get excited. So
absolutely. Absolutely. And it's a lot of fun.
I'm fascinated with psychics who help the police to solve murders and other crimes. With the increasing need nowadays to solve cold cases, psychics have become more widely sought out because police are now more accepting of their abilities. I'm sure the success rate has something to do with this. Thank you for offering your services to such an important task in helping families find closure, sometimes even locating their remains. How long have you been doing this?
Well, I make myself available whenever it's needed, so I've done it a few times. In the beginning, psychics did not offer their services, only, let's say, ones that weren't legitimate. Because what would happen, in fact, years ago, I had a publisher tell me get involved in crime because that sells, but I wouldn't do it for that reason. What happened years ago is when psychic would come in and they would give police details, they were often accused of the crime. Psychics did not want to do that because of that. I was president of the Jersey Society of Parapsychology for more than 10 years. So this was a problem. And then actually my cousin, who was a prosecutor in a county, he said that in homicides, they do use psychics, but they never let the public know.
Mm-hmm.
It's when they don't have, they're at a dead end and they can't find any clues, then they'll bring in a psychic. So it helps them to go in another direction, or it may help them to look like they may have a hunch and then a psychic may pick up on the same information. So then they know that's how they're going to go. In one case, unfortunately, I was able to give them a lot of detail. But what had happened is they called me too late because the person who committed the murder had already whitewashed the house, completely painted everything. So the energy of the house was different. And I was able to tell them, you get images of where I felt that the person went and where the body was. And they did go and look. They found traces of things, but they were never able to find the person who did it because it was too long of a period. Another case I worked on, what happened is they didn't tell me what it was until I got there. And as I walked around, I started to get impressions of somebody young who committed the murder. Yet they didn't even tell me who was murdered. They just took me to this house where there was a murder. And I started to see images of a car and the fact that there was a plaid shirt and the gun was wrapped up and thrown, and then it was near water. And I saw this whole thing. And it turned out to be that who was accused was the son of the mother that was killed. And she was killed in the driveway. And we went looking for the gun. There was this whole thing. A lot of the information that I gave them turned out to be true. And he was convicted, the son, for the murder of his mother. You give them clues, or you're giving them information that they may be thinking about, but they don't know in which direction to go in because they don't trust their own ability. I've lectured for the police, and some of them are very psychic. They just don't want to admit that.
Right.
But a detective actually is going to use that intuition and help solve crimes that way.
And the more sensitive they are, probably the better a detective they are.
Yes.
If they accept it and they go with it, just imagine what could come out of it. Exactly. And it doesn't cost them anything because psychic, I would never charge the police for any information that I give, nor would I ever charge a person if they need information about a murder. Another one that I did was scary. And that's when, and it's a funny story, that's when I stopped doing them. That's when my son put his foot down on me because, I'm going to go. I'm not going to look at danger for myself. I'm going to go to help somebody. And in this case, it wasn't the police, but they had a tape recorder for the police. The police couldn't be there because there was a lawsuit, something going on. So they couldn't come in. And it was the girlfriend's, I don't know whether they were married or it was just, she was engaged to him. And he was murdered. So I was called into the house and I started to pick up information, and I felt that it was somebody that knew him because the door was not locked. I got all this information, and I followed the footstep of where he was murdered without knowing it. And I started to give names. And apparently the name I gave was somebody that they suspected because they had a fight, the man that was killed, and he was a worker for him. It was a stockbroker. But then I started getting information about Russian mob, Monaco, the country, and it kept going. And I started to get scared because the police were going to get this audio tape, and I was picking up some pretty damaging information. And one of the information that I was given, actually, I was given the name of somebody who was very curious about why I was there and what I was going to do. So I got a little nervous. So they tape recorded me. There were 2 tape recorders going. Okay. So I finished this investigation. They had the tape recorders. I came home. My son went nuts because now that you mentioned the mob,
now you're getting afraid, that somebody can find out you're the psychic giving this information that's accurate, and then they can come after you. So I started saying to my son, don't worry, I'm protected. And he goes, yes, sure, you're protected. He goes, and when we get some strange cars coming down here, he said, then what are we going to do? I said, trust me, I know I'm protected. Well, what happened was they called me the next day and they said, this is so strange. They had 3 tape recorders going and only my voice when I would say one thing, and then everything was obliterated when I was giving information. And that's how the spirits protected me. Because you don't want that to be you don't want that recorded.
Right.
That can go in the hands of anyone.
Right.
So that was very scary to do that.
And that's incredible how it panned out, that they obliterated the necessary stuff. I
trust in the guidance around, because I know there was a time the Staten Island newspaper was interviewing me, and she didn't take notes. She took just a couple little notes, and she relied totally on her tape recorder. Well, and it was about a 2-hour meeting, and when she got home to play the tape again, she would start to hear me, and then you would hear voices that it was spirit that would obliterate what I was saying. So it does happen.
Incredible. You are protected. Amazing. I'm sure current events and current cases, you probably get things that come to you. For example, like this Gabby Petito now, this young girl, and they're looking for her fiance. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I feel he definitely killed her. They probably were taking drugs, pot or hallucinogenic drugs, something that they were probably experimenting with, and that's where it happened.
Do you think they're going to find him, or do you think that he's taken his life?
No, I think they're going to find him. I think he's trying to make them think that he is going to take his life or took his life, but I think he's trying to escape to another country. But they'll find him. I feel as though they will find him. It's a horrible situation.
Oh, it is. It's just devastating for that family, especially since she was just so all over the YouTube and had a following, and now they got to see her happy and smiling, and then they see the police video of when they pulled them over, because I guess there was an argument between the couple, and outsiders were privy to it and called the police to help her, and they tried to tell her to get out, and she didn't, and that's been on the news. Just a very sad thing.
It's sad. It's very, very sad. But it's scary. I mean, this was somebody, it was her boyfriend. I think she was engaged to him.
Yes.
Something like that happens.
I'm sure you're familiar with the Lacey Peterson case and Scott Peterson. What are your thoughts on that one?
Oh, I definitely felt that he committed the murder right from the beginning.
You did?
Yeah, definitely.
Even with all of this stuff coming out now in his defense, there's stuff coming out now saying that.
Yeah, no, I still feel in some way he did it. He was involved with it.
How awful. How awful.
I know. It's terrible. It's terrible. And really, it's interesting because I consulted my cousin when I was doing a case trying to prevent a murder. And it was up, I believe, in Sussex County. It was back quite a few years. And the woman had contacted me, and it was around a horse farm. And I started to receive information that her husband, or was her boyfriend, was trying to kill her. And she followed what I told her, and she went to the police, and the police accepted what she was saying because they had heard about me, because they knew me as a psychic. And what had happened is I told her, look, I see you on a tractor. I see him fooling around with the tractor, loosening the wheels, doing something. I said, are there tools there? And she said, yeah. I said, please be careful. And then ultimately I had her get her hair tested because he was making the food, and I felt that he was putting something in the food. And she did get her hair tested, and they found like small traces of arsenic. And then the one day, the tractor, had she not checked the wheels, the tractor would have fallen on top of her because the wheels came off.
Why was she still with this idiot?
I know, but that happens.
I just never understand.
I contacted my cousin because this was something preventing, and that's when he told me that in homicides, the first person they look for is the husband or the boyfriend or that, because there's a high percentage where that's who is the murderer.
Do you remember the Pam Smart case back in the 90s, Pamela Smart. She was a teacher and she had an affair with one of her students and they ended up killing her husband. The young man, recruited 2 other boys and they ended up killing her husband. And then she was ultimately convicted of the crime.
I don't remember that one.
It was in Massachusetts. No, actually it was in New Hampshire. It was in Derry, New Hampshire. And they actually had a documentary on it recently. And that's why it just came to my mind because it was a prominent case back then, I guess, because she was a teacher having an affair with an underage student and her husband wound up dead, and obviously they went to convict her for it. Now, maybe some cases from around the counties, I guess, over the years. For example, do you know anything about the Princess Doe case in New Jersey?
If it's something I feel very strongly about, then I would probably contact the police. But I always wait for them to contact me. If they need a psychic to bring in, then if they call me, I will go into it.
I know sometimes psychics get stuff that just comes to them. Maybe they'll be watching a program or the news and all of a sudden they'll get something that comes to them.
You could. But there's also, there are psychics who go after that because it gives them notoriety. I've never been one that's gone after it. So it's like, if I'm watching the murder, I may or may not be in my psychic mode when I'm watching the news about a murder. If it comes really strongly, then I'll say something. Like the case that was in the Amboys here at a carnival when the little boy went missing. It was in
I don't know about that one. What was that one about? I didn't know anything about it.
The little boy went missing and she claimed that somebody kidnapped him at the carnival, and ultimately she was convicted of the murder. My cousin actually was the homicide prosecutor for that one. And I felt right in the beginning that she was lying. She did the murdering of her son.
Poor little guy. What a shame.
It's tough. And of course, you have to remember when you get involved in that, you get very emotional and it could stay with you.
Sure.
You have to, when you're doing a murder case, you have to be able to receive information, but to keep all your emotions objective. Otherwise, it plays in your mind. It can literally haunt you.
When you're working on these cases, have you ever made connections with the victims themselves come back to you asking for help, or maybe a need to move on or confusion about their deaths?
Yes. Okay, I can tell you about this one. This was in a reading. Somebody came to me who just lost her daughter, and the fiance came with her. So I was making contact with her daughter who had overdosed. But in the communication, I clearly saw that it was tainted and that it was purposely tainted. And I picked up 2 females. I gave them the initials or the names, and I said they would find them. Now, what happened? This is a bizarre case. So what happened? They did find the women and they did have those names. And so she came back to me and they were going to go to trial. Like I said, what happened? So the daughter communicated again, but this time she was all excited and she was like jumping up and down. And I interpreted it to mean that she was excited because the next day they were going to go to court. Her fiance was going to testify. So I thought, this is why she was excited. Well, the next day came and her fiance never made it to court. He got into a car accident, was killed. So in retrospect, she was excited because she knew her fiance was going to die and be with her.
He was on his way to her.
Yeah. It was a shocker. I mean, I was totally shocked. Something just happened to me the other day on my ghost tour, and it was actually my girlfriend. And I picked up on her sister Mary, who was her twin. And I said, she's staying right by you. And I guess, well, sometimes you can't interpret it accurately. So this was on Saturday. So there was a reason why her sister was around her so much, and she had died like 2 years ago. Well, I just got notification last night that her other sister died and niece.
Oh.
So in retrospect, I'm realizing her sister Mary was coming around maybe to say something. Sometimes you can prevent it. I don't know how she died because I haven't talked to her yet. So, when you're doing something, and especially I'm doing random readings at a ghost tour, so you can't just spend time with one person and go deep and try to understand more fully why she may be saying that she's right there with her. So that was interesting too.
Now, you mentioned ghost tour. What do you do at this ghost tour?
I walk people around. It's a ghost walk. Most of it is outside. We're in the one house for a little bit. It's a museum. It's a fundraiser for the historical place it's in Scotch Plains, so it's in Union County. So as I go around, I'm telling them about the different ghosts there and explaining things. But see, what happens to me when I do a ghost investigation, my tummy does the walking first. What's unusual about me is the fact that when I'm near spirit, my stomach expands anywhere from 3.5 inches to 5.5 inches. And that's how I know a spirit is present. And then I'll get into my psychic mode to determine who it is and why it's there. So on the ghost tour, that's what happens. I'll go to each ghost hangout, as I call it, and they see the spirit through me. And what happens is this was the first weekend of the ghost tour, so it started to get activated and there were people starting to have experiences. So I would think that there's going to be more activity that goes on during the tour.
Do I understand correctly that you still paranormal investigate? Investigations, so to speak, in particular, not as a tour. For example, if somebody were to call and say, come to my residence or my business.
Well, do I go? Sure.
Do you still do them? Yeah.
Yes, I still do them. If I'm called, I will do it. Of course, with COVID, I've had to hold back on certain things to be able to do that. I have one that I probably am going to do in Tom's River soon. I haven't been able to get there yet because I have an ailing dog, so I can't leave him for a long period of time and be an hour and a half away because it's beyond Tom's River and be there a couple of hours and that. So I'm waiting until my son comes back and is here so I can maybe take off in the afternoon and know that the dog will be with him.
I don't know if you know it, but I'm also a paranormal investigator myself. I'm not nearly as gifted as you at all. I had some sensitivity when I was younger. It runs a little bit in the family, but not so much. So I can't really say that's what it is. But I had some premonitions when I was 12 that happened. And I guess it scared the bejesus out of me. So I stifled anything that may have been a possible thing until I got older. And now I'm starting to develop things more. But the people that I have on my team, which we call the Lady Ghostbusters, by the way, are very gifted women, very talented women. And how I met them was from interviewing them for my book of ghost stories. I was inspired to share my own personal accounts, and then I interviewed probably 100 people or more to get their stories, which I then wrote about in my books, Sussex County Hauntings and Other Strange Phenomena, Parts 1 and 2. In fact, I don't know if you're aware of it, but you were actually in my Sussex Hauntings 2 book.
No, I'm not.
Back in the 90s, a woman by the name of Megan Scott recruited you to help her with a home on Lloyd Avenue in Stanhope, New Jersey. Do you recall that particular house?
I know the name. Yeah, I know her name.
It was a pretty frightening experience for her. And when all was said and done, you actually told her it wasn't a ghost that haunted the house, but that it was a demon.
Okay.
And Megan had photos that she had taken when she was in the home. And she was so terrified, she ended up actually burning the pictures because a lot of crazy stuff happened to her with connection from that home. So yeah, when I was interviewing her for the book, your name came up. So you ended up in the book. And she also conferred with you on the Stanhope house on Main Street.
Yes.
The two of you visited the house in 2008, and apparently you had lots of activity there too.
Yes, that I remember being in there. She probably lived deeper into the wood, and that's why I don't remember it as much. But I know the name. I know her name. Absolutely.
Well, I'm sure you've met thousands and thousands of people over the years. But most creative people are multi-creative. It's just what it is. And I think it's marvelous when creative explore the multitude of options open to them. Over the years, you've added actor to your list. How did that come about?
In a strange way. I was teaching a course at Middlesex County College, the adult school at night, on the paranormal. And there was an Indian family in it, husband, wife, and daughter. And what happened is they have a friend who had a production company, and that person had his friend come from India who was a famous music composer there. So what happened is his friend called him and said, wanted to meet him for dinner. And he couldn't do it. And he said he was doing a movie, his friend. So my student said, well, what's the movie about? and his friend told him it was going to be on possession. So he says, well, I'm taking a course right now. And, my instructor is a psychic and talks about possession. So it was arranged for me to meet the producer. Now, I had no idea I was being considered for the part in the movie. So I had to meet them at an Indian restaurant. And it was one of the funniest things in the world because I'm walking in and there's all these Indian men and one woman, but they're all staring at me. It's sort of like they were trying to figure me out, or what they were doing is checking me out for the part. But I didn't know that. I had no idea. So then I sat with the composer who was doing the movie, and we were chit-chatting about possession, and that's what I thought it was all about. And at the end of the night, he asked me, so I really want to cast you in my movie. So he says, would you mind if you'd be playing the grandmother? I says, no, that's fine. And he gave me the script to read, and then he came over the next night. And that's how it happened. But, and I'm in the middle of doing ghost tours. I'm driving to Amish country. I'm studying my lines as I'm driving to Pennsylvania. It was wild. And it was so funny. And then one of the times driving there, I realized, how in the world did this happen? And then I remembered when I was in college, I made a wish very strongly. I wished to play an old character in a movie because my major was public speaking and theater arts. And then I realized, what am I doing? I'm playing an old character in a movie. Because I was very fascinated with doing the stage makeup for the old characters. It fascinated me, and I would make myself up that way. And I wanted to play a character like that. So I had forgotten about the wish. It was not something that I ever thought about again. And so I realized when I was the second time going to the Amish country, that thought came to mind. And I realized, oh my God, here I am playing an old character in a movie like I wished for. So I did it.
What's the name of the movie?
Amy, She Can See the Possessed.
Amy, She Can See the Possessed.
Christopher Atkins played in it. He was the exorcist in it. He was the one that played against Brooke Shields in the Blue Lagoon.
Christopher Atkins.
Yes, so he was the exorcist in the movie.
How exciting.
It was really it was a hoot. It was a hoot. Never do I go places without makeup. And here I had to play an old character. They had to make my hair gray and put this bonnet. Oh, it was a riot. It really was fun.
You were in another production as well off Broadway, weren't you?
Yes, that was my own. A Broadway producer contacted me who had been on one of my ghost tours, and he wanted me to do a special event. I did it, 2 different years, where the weekend of Halloween, I would do performances, just a one-woman show on my ghost experiences. And then I would go into the audience. And when my stomach expanded, then I knew that a spirit was around that particular audience member. And then I would go into mediumship. So yes, that was also a hoot. There I am, and it was in Times Square. It was off Broadway right there in Times Square. And there I am walking to it and knowing I'm going into this building, all of it, off Broadway. It was shocking, like, oh my God. And I went alone. There was nobody to go with me. So I drove alone and went, and there I was doing this Broadway show on the 1 day, 2 days of doing shows.
You've lived a very exciting life, and you still live an exciting life.
Yes.
The list never ends. You have author on yours as well. You've written a book called Awakening the Mystic Gift. Tell me about that.
Yes, that is a book that goes through all of how I became a psychic, all the questions I had, all the doubts that I had, everything that I did to develop my psychic ability. And of course, all the different doubts and things that I felt in my thoughts about it. So it's a memoir on becoming psychic.
I suppose you have to get rid of all that doubt to be successful.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I was total skeptic. It was tough because I'm Catholic, and it was like, oh my God, what am I doing?
Right.
But in the book, well, 2 things happened to me. One, I was at the Spy House Museum, and there was a priest there, and he asked me if I would do a reading for him.
Ooh.
I said, okay. Now, naturally, I was scared to do this, but I did it. And it turned out to be that as a result, I kept him being a priest. And what had happened is after we finished it, He started to walk away, and then he turned around and said, "Can I give you a hug?" And I said, "Certainly." And that's when he told me, "You've convinced me to stay a priest."
Very good.
And then another time, my own priest at my church, I had to go there because my daughter was going to be a godmother, but she had never received her confirmation because that's when I was going through my divorce. And so I had to go ask the priest if she could be the adult to, when the bishop came, to be confirmed. So we're sitting there, and all of a sudden he says to me, he says, "Do you still do what you do?" And I go, uh-oh, I'm in trouble now. And I says, "You mean the psychic work?" And he says, "Yes." He said, "I've been following you over the years." And he said, "You do good work." He said, "Somebody's got to deal with the spirit world." And he said, "It's your calling. Don't stop it."
How wonderful.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my goodness. You would never have heard that 10 years, 20 years ago at all.
No.
Oh, my goodness. I actually wrote a story about a school in Sussex County in Franklin called the Immaculate Conception. It's a Catholic church. And the person that I was interviewing at the time was a former teacher. And she was telling me about the paranormal activity in the church and in the school, and how the teacher before her that she replaced had experiences, and how the priest came up to her and asked her what her experiences were, because he was experiencing things and he didn't know how to deal with it, because he knew how to do an exorcism, but he didn't know how to deal with spirit. And I had a discussion on social media requesting people to share their stories about this particular location when I was writing the chapter. And I had parents coming back being very defensive. "I had 6 children go through that school and nothing ever happened." And I said, well, I have an account from a priest and 2 teachers and a student. So just because it didn't happen to you or any of your kids doesn't mean that it didn't happen.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's really wonderful to hear, though, that the priests are actually receptive to the gifts, because, there are indications of it in the Bible, but people just don't want to believe it.
Absolutely.
They just don't want to believe it.
No. And when and I've had people cite the Bible, but I say, I don't read cards. I do it clairvoyantly. And before every reading, every seance, every ghost investigation, I always say a prayer and put it under God.
That's wonderful.
So, and if you look at the Bible, there's been prophets, so it's there. It's absolutely there.
Now, how is someone able to get your book, Awakening the Mystic Gift? Where would they go to get your book?
They could. I actually have copies in my home, and there are some on Amazon, and New Leaf carries it.
New Leaf.
Yes.
You still do give personal consultations to people?
Yes, I do. They can email me at psychicjanedoherty@gmail.com. They can go to Facebook. I'm on that. And also my website is under my name, Jane Doherty, DOHERTY.com. They can reach me that way.
Wonderful. And they can find out everything about you and what you do over there. Gifted people such as yourself never cease to amaze me. I'm thrilled by today's reception of the spirit world, which is so different from what it was years ago, a short time ago even. I want to just thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule today to open up to me about your beautifully colored background. And I hope that we can do this again sometime. I really enjoyed it.
I would love to.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much. I've enjoyed
you
being
again.
To you, my ghostly listeners, you can follow me on my website, authoreleanorwagner.com, where there are links to my books and video updates and photographs from all of my investigations. Also, sign up or level up on my Author Eleanor Wagner Patreon program, now for special bonus opportunities available to its patrons, such as one-on-ones with me and co-hosting opportunities on an episode of Eleanor Wagner's Strange and Scary World podcast.